All right. It is Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. It is almost Halloween, believe it or not. Time flies when you're having fun in the fast lane. I just got back from Brownsville on a rush trip where we launched the broadband project that they're doing with lit communities. CMG is managing the project management office. And it's $100 million project, and it's going to change the south of Texas dramatically. And then they're going to move forward with some 32 use cases of modernizing their water utility, power utility, and the city as a whole. Brownsville will be a million people destination, and it will be one of the smartest cities in the United States in the next 2 years. I'm very excited about that project. But before we get rolling, we have a great guest. And obviously the team is here today. Let's ask our John Sibley Butler for some intro.
My world has been night, daylight, sunsets and dawn. And your eyes are like two things I dream upon. Sometimes I lose it, and sometimes I win. Life seems to make me start all over again, but I just don't know what I would do if my world didn't have you.
It's very nice, John. How are you doing today, John?
Well, I'm pretty fine. I can't believe that we have martial law in the world today in Europe, with Russia declaring martial law in the South. And I've come to the other conclusion that the distributive workplace going forward is a major unstructured problem that we would have to solve. That is, given the internationalization work and given the fact that people are electing not to go to work, that means that my workforce could be all over the world instead of in the region or in the city. So I think that the two major things that's been on my mind have been martial law, which has been declared in Europe. I usually look at that in a third world country. And the other thing is distributive workforce. I think that when you look at who's in the office, whether it's major firms or universities or churches, then nobody is there. So I think it would be major that we look at going forward. Otherwise, there's a great day in Austin, Texas. The Longhorns won. I'm feeling good. And there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the entrepreneurship world. The innovation is just off the scale. It's good to see you. Oh, I can't hear you.
Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm up here in Rhode Island where it's a bit blustery and cool, but very beautiful. The leaves are turning, and it is very hard when it's so gorgeous to believe that there is a full-scale land war going on with its absolutely appalling share of excesses, the cruelty, the brutality, and ultimately the pointlessness of it is very depressing. Meanwhile, Europe is bracing for a very difficult cold winter without adequate fuel, with hugely inflated electric prices, 10 times and more what they should be. Britain has a leadership crisis. There's new leadership in Italy, and we don't know what it means. As yet, the leadership in Germany is undetermined as to how strong it will be and how effective. We sort of know what the situation is in France. But we're going into a difficult winter. We have our own midterm elections coming up, and they may indicate a change of direction for the United States, which may not be very helpful to ongoing programs.
Yeah, well, as the Chinese may say, may you live in interesting times. And boy, are they interesting. So, Marty, I see you twice now. You're switching. Marty, can you hear us?
We got you on too, but no.
You have what's going on with your audio, Marty?
He's muted.
You need to unmute, bottom left.
Wouldn't be a Teams call if you didn't have to unmute at some point, right?
There you go, Marty.
I can hear
So
you.
Marty, how are you? Welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andres. Thank you for having me. Thank you for displaying your KU Jayhawk National Championship banner there. That's good. Makes those of us in Kansas feel well.
Absolutely.
It's good to see you.
I'm gonna ask you to see if you can shut down that entire second laptop.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
No, that's no big deal.
I've got it here.
Yeah.
There you
yeah,
go. Is that better?
Well,
All right, we're high-tech people, but
yeah, you need
not
to,
always.
You need to sign off. You need to sign off. Just still
Okay,
on.
is it gone?
Yeah, just turn it up and sign off. So anyway, for those of you listening that don't know, the Honorable Marty Travers, a great friend, and in many ways an amazing human being that have done great stuff. I'm going to introduce you to him. He's just recently retired from Black and Veatch, and he's former executive director of the company, and among many other things. Before that, he was a group president. Before that, he held many roles in the company. He was there some 42 years or so, and he's going to be with us for the whole hour. I think his biggest tenure was when he was president of Telecommunications Group over 13 years. But he also, started at the very bottom of the company and had different roles in project control and project management and business development. And I think he worked in just about every group. He holds a BS in civil engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and is a professional engineer in the state of Kansas. Welcome, Marty.
Thanks, Andres. Great to be here. Good to be with you and John and Llewellyn. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So as you know, Marty, we talk about digital transformations, and Black and Veatch under your leadership has done a gazillion of them. So why don't you just catch us up real quick on where you're up to? You decided to retire. Is this a final sunset for a golf-dedicated life to watch KU games, or are we talking about this is the third chapter, which is about to be unfolded?
It's the third chapter for sure. I've had a great time at Black and Veatch. As a tremendous employer. Loved every day of it. But now I'm going to do some things more what I'm referring to as episodic employment. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move to doing things that are shorter in duration, maybe repetitive. So I hope to do some work on a variety of for-profit company boards and some consulting as well. So I'd like to, continue to stay involved in industry, but not on the 24-hour cycle that we all live for so many years. And I think it's a great time to do that because, post-COVID, people are used to and more comfortable with a different work style. I know I've adapted to that, and it's been fun. And so I appreciate all I got to do at Black and Veatch and all the nice things that I experienced and the great people I worked with, but now I'm going to do things a little different, and very much looking forward to that.
Well, I'm excited to hear that because, CMG is doing all kinds of amazing things. We'll talk about some of them. Mm-hmm. So tell everybody real quick your journey at Black and Veatch. Maybe spend some time on telecom more than anything else, but maybe most people and they're going to listen to this broadcast, a month from now, don't know Black and Veatch as well as you and I do. So why don't you go ahead and
right.
Share a little bit on that?
Well, Black and Veatch is a consulting and engineering and construction company that focuses primarily on areas that you could define as critical human infrastructure. So when you think of infrastructure that the world needs to function, it typically includes the areas that Black and Veatch works in. So it's electric power, water, telecommunications, natural gas, and as broadly as you might expand that. So it includes power generation, power delivery, wired communications, wireless communications, liquefied natural gas, all a wide variety of solutions. And the company is really a designer and builder of that infrastructure,
Mhm.
not an owner, not an operator, but really enabling utilities and other essential service providers to build their infrastructure to support it. So, over the years, I've had the opportunity at Black and Veatch to spend a lot of time in the power delivery space, a lot of time in the telecommunications space, renewable energy and electric vehicle charging, smart cities, data centers. So all the kind of infrastructure that really gives us the robust lifestyle that we all enjoy on a local and a global basis. So
Yeah.
it's an impactful company. It's a company that's super well positioned for where federal spending is targeted in the US.
Mhm.
And we'll probably get into some of that with the recovery plan and the infrastructure bill and all that.
Mhm.
So I enjoy it. I think what I view in this digitization
Mhm.
area is a tremendous opportunity to improve the security of infrastructure, as well as reduce the carbon emissions of infrastructure, and also expand into areas like education,
Mhm.
where education can be dramatically improved through the implementation of some of the digital techniques, and really help shrink sort of that digital equity gap that
Mhm.
exists with a lot of parts of America, that
Mhm.
we can have a real positive impact on as an industry and as a group of professionals. So
Yeah.
it's very exciting time.
Yeah. So you and I have had some great conversations, and I would categorize a very good friendship over the years. And I'm curious, Marty, now that you can maybe share with more freely things, if you had to pick one project that you're amazingly proud of, which one would you pick, or maybe two or three? I don't know if there's more.
Yeah. Well, things that I remember and I think are impactful, was our involvement with the build out of Tesla's supercharger network across the United States.
Mhm.
So that was a game changer in terms of the practicality of electric vehicle
Mhm.
transit. And so when we got involved with Tesla, people had this range anxiety factor of, I don't know that I want to own an electric vehicle because I'm uncertain about how far I can go and if there's going to be a charging station when I need it. And so that was very impactful for us to deploy a brand new landscape of infrastructure. Another one that I'm proud of is our deployment of Sirius satellite radio.
Mhm.
So many people think that satellite radio is radio coming from a satellite, which of course it is. But there are
Mhm.
many parts of the countryside, particularly urban areas, where radio signals from satellites don't reach the ground because they're blocked
Right.
by tall buildings. And so we had the opportunity to build a terrestrial repeater network that made that coverage seamless
Mhm.
and blended between satellite coverage and a terrestrial repeater network. And
Mhm.
again, that's one I'm very proud of as well, because it enabled something that made people's lives more enjoyable.
Sure.
Now, arguably, it's not critical, but it is an added benefit. And then all the different opportunities we've had to deploy 2G, 3G, 4G wireless are all impactful of changing the way the world operates.
Yeah.
So that was fun for me to be a part of the teams that did all those.
Absolutely. Guys?
Yeah, so Marty, as you look back on the world of how it's changed since we've finished college and we've finished high school, and by the way, I'm also going emeritus at the University of Texas, so but as you look back at what's going on and what I call the converging of technologies in the digital age, and you look at something like a data center, right? Then I read, well, maybe people are beginning to pull back on data centers because the rising costs of data centers, and perhaps they'll go back to what we would say, doing it at the office. And remember, to me, a data center, when I was at Northwestern, we had the dumb computer and we hooked up to it. We didn't call it cloud. So how do you view all the stuff you've done, especially, I can think all of these technologies are converging. I think the digitalization and the data and the convergence of data are very, very interesting. How do you see the convergence of that data with helping us to understand where we're going in the future?
Yeah, John, I think it's a really important point, the cost effectiveness of large data centers, the practicality of it. I'm just tremendously impressed with the capabilities that industry has to simplify solutions in order to make economically viable business cases around that kind of technology. So I think with digitization and with data centers, I think you'll see the marketplace generate ideas, whether it be edge data centers and reducing the amount of transit between the place where the data is generated and the place where the data is calculated and analyzed. I think you'll see a lot of that going forward. And I think what's amazing about the economy is business plans will get developed and sorted out based on their economic merit. And there's a lot of things that could be done, but sort of to your point, if they don't make economic sense, they won't be implemented fully. And that's what I think the world is still sorting out. I think, for example, 5G telecom is an example of a technology that is still striving to find the right business case and find the right ecosystem to support it. And there are a lot of brilliant minds out there working very diligently to establish those kind of business cases that make 5G deployment effective. And I think the world is gaining on that. And we'll see more and more 5G business cases emerge. But some will crater because they're not economically viable. And that's what'll be fun to work through.
Let me just follow up on that. I think one of the things that I'm seeing is that as the generation or my generation move on, then I see a lot of renting being done by the next generation rather than ownership. I'm working now with many enterprises. They would like to sell the enterprises, but they're the buyers.
Yeah.
Can you envision a time when the small enterprises themselves would be put on a cloud, if you will, and from that cloud, then we develop a marketplace for small enterprises. The idea of taking over the family business, given what's happening with the cloud and where everything's going, I would say that it is a dying trend, but it is going that way. And I think it has to do with the digitization of the world, how the next generation looks at the world. Do I really need to own a car? Do I need to buy a house and keep it and sell it? Do I really, really need to buy anything? Because, I buy a cell phone and when it goes, I just trade it in.
Right.
I can use Uber, and of course, people are now putting their houses on the market, where if you go to Mardi Gras in New Orleans, you just rent a house and you do that. How do you see what I call the gap in our value system of ownership in our market economy. And all of the things that are happening with the next generation in terms of how they view the world, what they should own, whether it's housing, whether it's automobiles. You don't own those things, you rent those things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of times the younger generation are more experience focused than ownership focused. So they want to experience a ride in a car, but they don't want to own a car and they don't want to be tied down. I think, the contrast to that is the tremendous amount of investment by private equity and the like in those facilities that you're talking about the younger generations wanting to experience. So if you look at developments that I've started to read about lately that are basically build to rent communities, they're not built to own, but they're being built by investors for investors who want to rent facilities from, for a period of time and move on. So I think there is a lot of capital still active in the build out and ownership of, critical infrastructure that we talked about, whether that be housing or water or power delivery or telecom. So yeah, I think in the near term, there is a transition between ownership and rental by the consumers, but I still think there's a very strong financial industry out there to invest the capital in the build out of these kind of systems, and we see that. I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of companies who are interested in investing significant amount of capex to build facilities, whether they be telecom or housing or whatever, for that generation that doesn't want to own it and wants to rent it. And it's all built on a steady recurring revenue stream that is anticipated to be available. So it may change some of who the buyer is, and we may see, engineering and construction companies having more financial clients as opposed to corporate clients who are the owner and developer.
Llewellyn.
Yes, very interesting, Marty. I wonder, though, whether we're not seeing a sort of bifurcation of the market where people may not want to own houses. Owning a house has lost some of the imperative that it had at one time. Particularly, you can't deduct as much of the mortgage, which was a huge imperative to buy a house.
Right.
But when it comes to automobiles and to the private car, that's a rather personal thing, and people like to have their own, because the moment, I've said it on this program before, the moment you get into your own car, you're at home. You've got your stuff, your music, etc. You've gotten home. If you get into a public convenience, albeit privately dedicated to you, it still isn't yours. You can personalize a rented home, but you can't personalize a rented automobile. And I think there's a difference there, and I shall be interested to see how it plays out. But my question for Black and Veatch is, do you have the talent you need to execute the work that is coming at you as we move into this digitized age, as we have to have more electric generation, as we have to have build out against the encroaching sea levels, and as we're going to need to upgrade the entire infrastructure of the country? Where is the talent, not the money, but the talent going to come from? Are there enough engineers, and are they available to you?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's very challenging to find enough qualified labor, whether that be engineers, whether that be construction workers or project managers, all of that. I think you're right to be concerned about the availability of appropriate quantities of labor. It's it's an issue. It's the lifeblood of all service companies is staff levels and having the right number of people. I would say today it's a razor thin balance between having enough people and being understaffed. What that tends to cause companies that are in the engineering and construction space to do, in my mind, is two different things. One is to expand your perspective quite globally. And so, many companies in the engineering and construction space have invested in developing personnel in other parts of the world, not just the United States, who can support projects, around the world. So I think it causes companies to think more globally about their resources. And then on the other hand, I think it also causes companies in that space to make significant investment in development of tools that take hours of people time out of the projects and out of the work. So creating bots that can accelerate production and create work product with less people hours per project on them. And I think that's because, in my mind, the numbers are never going to get up to the staff levels that companies had in the baby boomer prime work years. But now, as baby boomers age out of the work life and into retirement, it's a zero-sum game. There's not enough people. So you've got to work faster and more effectively, maybe not faster, but more efficiently with the people you have. And you've got to open your geographic horizon.
So
That's very interesting. I'd like to follow up, if I might.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up, and that is, I want to inquire about the quality of engineers coming out of the universities. We have a huge drive towards STEM education.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean a lowering of standards? Is the quality of the engineering student being damaged, or are we accepting lesser qualified people into the schools and sending them out of the schools?
I don't think so. My experience at Black and Veatch is that the young new professionals coming out of university are probably more robust in their perspective and more robust in their skill set than they were 40 years ago when I was coming out. I think almost all of the people we are hiring have had quite productive internships during their college experience. My last job before going to work at Black and Veatch was washing city buses in Albany, New York. The people that are coming out of college today, they built like a small nuclear reactor in their summer internship. I mean, they are doing so much more and are so much better equipped from a technology standpoint than people were 40 years ago. I think that's the encouraging part, is that we're going to need more productivity and more efficiency from the workforce. And frankly, I think students of today are better prepared to achieve that productivity improvement. And I think that's natural. I'm sure my level was better than somebody 80 years ago. And I think today's generation coming out of school is even better. So yeah, I'm not worried about lowering the standards at this point.
That's
and
correct, yeah.
your STEM education point is part of it. I mean, some of that hands-on experience is coming in fourth grade, where I was learning to tie my shoes in fourth grade, and they're doing Raspberry Pi programming in fourth grade.
There you go. Marty, let's do a quick tour around the world because you have a global view of things. Most of our guests don't. So tell us real quick. Let's talk about water. Water challenges, water infrastructure, water build-outs. Who's leading the world? U.S., Europe, Asia. What's going on? Just high level. Where is the water business at?
Yeah, I think the center of gravity for technology development is Singapore with regard to water. Singapore has led technology development in the water industry for many years. They have a annual Singapore International Water Week conference that generally highlights all of the advancements. And so I would say water, certainly America, the US is very strong in water, but I know at Black and Veatch, there's a lot of respect for technology development in Asia and in particular in Singapore.
Okay. What about electric power, the grid, the two-way power grid, other than Austin, Texas? Where else have you built it?
Well, I think the US is probably the most focused on that because as far as I can tell, we've made the most progress in the US with regard to vehicle charging and distributed renewables and the like. Now I say that, and you certainly look and see what's going on in Germany and in other parts of the world with regard to an interest in decarbonization. But if you look at the center of gravity of Black and Veatch's work, the US is super aggressive on that.
Got it.
And I think that's driven in a lot of ways by large corporate entities being committed to decarbonization, zero emissions, rolling back their carbon usage. So I think the US is as far ahead as anybody at this point.
Is ESG a major game changer in terms of policy and direction, investment, ESG?
Yeah, very much so. I when you read about and you interact with companies that are focused on ESG goals, it appears at times to override even the financial considerations of doing it. I had an opportunity a while back, and I won't mention the specific airlines, but I met with two of them in Dallas that are headquartered in Dallas, so you can narrow it down. But their commitment to carbon-free fuel,
right,
is tremendous, and the amount of volume that they would take in sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, the market can't produce even a tenth of what they would like to do today.
Wow.
And so there's tremendous opportunity driven by these large corporates to developers to identify opportunities for them to provide sustainable aviation fuel. And that's a corporate mandate. Or you look at the large hyperscale data center companies who are, they're doing their best, but they've got rows and rows of diesel generators as backup power. And they just cringe when they look at them because they know burning diesel is completely not in their strategic plan, but they've got to find some other fuel because the world expects them to be 24/7 reliable, but they don't want to be reliable burning diesel. And so there's a lot of emphasis there. And so it's not to say they've given up on the economics over the value of doing something sustainable, but they're close. They're willing to pay a premium
Mhm.
for that.
Last quick question to pick your brain. Telecom. We hear all the marketing about 5G. My understanding is that there is not that many real 5G roaming coverage in the US as there is in China. Where are we on wireless broadband? And there's a big push in the US for broadband everywhere, so we can catch up to Singapore and Korea and Japan and what's going on in China. Who's winning the broadband world war? And where are things at? Where is 5G actually in this journey? 5 years in, 20 years to go? How much more before 6G shows up?
Yeah, I used to think, Andres, I was going to work until 8G. The pace, the speed of the G's were coming out in a way that I thought I was going to make it to 8. I only made it to 5. But what I think is challenging about 5G is it's still in search of a business case that requires it. And it's still in many ways in search of handsets that are useful.
Right.
Now that said, the carriers have a lot of brilliant people, and the OEMs have a lot of brilliant people
Mhm.
who are in search of that business case
Mhm.
that makes everybody want to go down to the store and buy your 5G device. But today, I don't think it's all the way there.
Mhm.
And I think what'll be interesting to see is, it seems to me that right now in wireless, the biggest mover is private LTE, private 5G,
Mhm.
more so than
Public.
public
Mhm.
wide area
Mhm.
5G.
Mhm.
And that may be what it turns out to be.
Mhm.
But I attended the Mobile World Congress
Mhm.
conference in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago. And
Mhm.
that's the old CTIA show.
Yep.
And it was dominated with private LTE discussions. And
Mhm.
there was little to no discussion about macro public
Right.
5G.
Mhm.
And so I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's the technology sorting itself out
Mhm.
based on the business case that's feasible in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And so I think it'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
how that
John.
matures.
Yes,
That's
yes, Mark,
that,
let's go back to the energy. Louisiana and some other states have divested about 800 million from BlackRock over issues with ESG as a pushback there. And the whole idea is a business case. And I think that Texas might do the same thing because they thought that it was going against their interest, if you will, to invest in BlackRock and the ESG push. How do you see that as we go forward in that conflict over the reality of what's happening to the environment and then the reality of jobs and maintaining the economic stability of states or countries or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, I think it's a very fine line, John. I mean, there are certainly motivations to improve climate and reduce the impact of climate change. And then there's financial realities and societal realities that demand high speed, that demand high reliability, and not all of that is conducive with zero carbon emissions. But I continue to be impressed with the creativity of industry to develop solutions to those kind of problems. And, it's an iterative process, and there will be some backsliding as technology is deployed and it doesn't work quite as good. So you got to go back. And I think there'll be back and forth on that, but the momentum is definitely up and to the right. And maybe the comparison is the stock market. Yeah, you'll find some dips and you'll find some times when progress isn't as strong as you want it. But I think industry, the financial community, and society are pushing in that zero carbon direction. And I think there probably are statistics that will bear out that it's making a positive impact.
I'd like to ask a question along this line, and that is we have expectations that particular technologies will carry the future for us. For example, in energy generation, it's largely felt that it'll be the two large renewables, wind and solar, plus small modular reactors. And this will get us to a carbon-free future. But there may be another path entirely. We may get a technology that can capture the carbon, and we can continue to burn a lot of natural gas, for example. The expectation that the bird in the hand is the bird can be a very dangerous one. We've often thought that something would carry the future, and it hasn't. You know, all those things in popular mechanics from my boyhood, the nuclear reactor in the basement, the flying car in the garage, etc., haven't exactly worked out that way at all, have they?
No.
How do you see the future of electric generation and supply? I would also just add as a codicil, you mentioned you had been at that conference. I was just at the UBBA conference, Utility Broadband Alliance conference.
Okay.
And there was hardly any mention of 5G, and most people said, well, we've already got 4G, 4.8, why do we need 5G? In fact, it was rather heartily dismissed by a great variety of people, not by only those who are heavily invested in 4G. So I think analysis may be quite right. It hasn't found its mission completely yet.
Yeah. I think, to your point about the future of electric generation, and where I think it's never a silver bullet. I think it's a collection of bronze bullets that'll end up making the day. I think all of the technologies have their application in certain economic conditions, geographic conditions, atmospheric conditions, weather conditions. So I think that's what makes it fun from an engineering perspective, is doing the analysis and integrating multiple solutions in a way that you satisfy the overall need. And, you look at that today with, well, the sun isn't always shining, and the wind isn't always blowing. So we've got to do something to balance that out. Okay, energy storage, that comes into play. How about tidal power? How about hydrogen as a fuel created from, electrolysis of water and those kind of things? So I think to achieve the kind of decarbonization goals that the world wants, it won't be just one solution. It'll be a network of integrated solutions that pull all of those potential solutions together and come up with a new model.
Yeah. Let me jump right in to ask a couple things for Marty to chime in. So Marty, my favorite new vehicle is the F-150 Lightning.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you live in Texas. It wouldn't be anything without a pickup truck, right?
I know. I don't know if you already put a down payment for one, but I have. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to charge it at the university for free, and then I'm going to drive it home and run my house from it.
Okay.
What do you think that's going to do to the electric industry?
Yeah, that's pretty disruptive. Yeah. That's huge.
So now let's push forward. There are 22 million registered vehicles in Texas. Let's fantasize for a moment that they all go F-150 Lightning. They all have a 100 kilowatt hour battery. That's 2,200 gigawatt hours of juice that we would need to charge the cars, but also that we could use that juice to feed the grid. What would that do to the whole industry?
Well, I think it would continue to disrupt the distribution grid. which, you know, you mentioned earlier, the two-way power flow issues and the like. So yeah, I think those circumstances have to be on the mind of utility planners throughout America. You know, the idea that electricity can be free for vehicle charging, it's hard to get away from free. You know, I've always said I can move a lot of product if it's free.
Right.
And I think the ability for whoever is providing that free electricity to do that on and on is, you know, suspect.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I think it's probably be careful what you get used to.
Yeah.
Because if you get used to free electricity, it's probably going to go away.
What I haven't told you is that I'm building a 64 megawatt solar farm just for me at the university.
You know, let's add that free is a business model for Microsoft.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this one. You know, we've talked a lot about the future, and let's talk some about education. One of the things that's happening at universities is that in some fields, the kids understand before they get there. So as you know, with the application of computers to design, whether it's computer design, architecture design, engineering design, if the kids are interested in that because of the program that's out there, they already know how to design a house, and how to design an airplane. And the architecture professors would say, well, what can we teach them? So I think technology has made the learning curve, I mean, it's much easier.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it's like, well, in Vietnam, we flew to Huey, and now they're just kind of guided, or they just tap it.
Right.
And I think that is true of biotechnology too, also. So my question is this: as we lean on the future scientists to understand and take on different kinds of problems, what do you see as the major problem of all of the things that we've talked about that you work on that would give us problems in the future? For example, I'm always amazed that there are no potholes in ancient Rome streets, but there are potholes in Cleveland, Ohio. So what do you see when you look, what keeps you up at night about the whole infrastructure of America? What keeps you, is it how we do bridges? Is it how we do communications? Is it the destruction of the communication system, which everybody depends upon now, our satellite system? How do you view and look at what keeps you up at night now?
Yeah, well, probably the interconnectedness of all of it. You know, the tremendous dependency of each of those infrastructure systems on each other. Like you run a water treatment plant and you think, oh, I'm all on my own here. Well, no, you're very dependent on electricity. You're very dependent on telecom for connectivity and metering and monitoring and all that. Same with the electric utility. You know, well, we're just all on our island here. We're generating our electricity, but no, we need water to be treated in our power plant in order to produce electricity. So I think that the degree of interconnection between all of these systems is there's times they don't really not as conscious of how interdependent the network is.
Yeah.
You know, you could throw in transportation, you know, oh, we got a great light rail system in our community, except when the electric grid goes down, and then it's just stalled. And, you know, and so I think, and you see that in a lot of communities, the tremendous collaboration between those infrastructure system owners and operators. And I believe they have a strong understanding and an awareness of their interrelationships. But I'm not so sure the users of the systems really do. And so, you know, when you're clamoring for faster or more light rail, but you're also clamoring for, you know, green energy and not, you know, zero emissions in the production of it, well, that puts a challenge on the capital planning of the utility and it trickles through the entire community. So I think it's just having leadership at the community level that sees those interconnected pieces and values all of them to make the community more robust.
Yeah. Marty, I think that you would probably agree with me, and I think you spearheaded this significantly successfully at Black and Veatch. Smart cities seems to be sort of the ultimate next generation integration of all these things. And when you look at smart cities and the work that Black and Veatch is doing, where is the low-hanging fruit? Is it street lights? Are you familiar with a company called Clear World?
Yes, I am. I know Larry. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that in the future of cities? What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, when I was at Black and Veatch, we had the opportunity to deploy the New York City Wi-Fi kiosk network, and that was replacing all of the phone booths in New York City with kiosks that had digital advertising, Wi-Fi, charging, and all that stuff. I think smart cities, again, will depend on the business case, and that business case will be community by community driven. And so, I think certainly there's a lot to apply in smart cities with regard to traffic. No doubt we can improve traffic by being smarter and having higher speed connectivity between signals, and we can improve safety. I think other applications of smart cities definitely include broader distribution of Wi-Fi connectivity to help shrink the digital gap and improve the equity of digital capabilities across communities. And that may be urban. Sometimes we think smart cities is dense urban, and it could be, but sometimes it's also smart communities that are rural and that are left off the digital highway. And so I think smart cities definitely includes expanding the connectivity opportunities, and then all the other infrastructure systems that make a city, like electric, like water. Those are all opportunities to continue to improve the safety, the education, the resilience of communities.
Right.
So I think, again, it'll depend on strong business cases being established, but there's great opportunity. And with today's federal funding through the IIJA and the IRA funding, assertive cities and creative cities can find the money to make that work. And I think you'll see various mayors or governors move forward really as champions of infrastructure. And wouldn't it be interesting to see campaigns by public officials built around improvement of infrastructure to better the quality of their community?
Right. Llewellyn?
I'm interested in where you see the future of your construction business. Is it in civil engineering, rebuilding the old infrastructure and maybe bracing against future climate change? Is it with the utilities? Is it with the telephone companies, with the telephone applications, or is it going to remain much as it has been?
Yeah, I think, in broadly diversified companies, I think it's unlikely that it's one technology that's going to rule the day. And I think, if you were doing strategic planning at any of the large engineering and construction companies, you'd want to have a diversified portfolio. So there's no doubt that today, activities that result in decarbonization are moving very rapidly. But then there are other components of critical infrastructure that are good margin, very stable, very predictable growth. Certainly no reason to get away from them. So it's part of building a portfolio that has stable and steady returns, maybe like a bond fund, then some more rapidly growing areas that are like buying into IPOs. And I think companies like those in the engineering and construction space tend to want a balanced portfolio, and they tend to cover a variety of aspects with the intent that they don't hit a valley and that they just have successively higher peaks in their growth.
Right.
Thank you.
Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very interesting stuff. And let me just ask you this. As we move forward in the 21st century, as we're going, and we look at the globalization of what's going on with industry, and then we look at the movement of different countries, we look at it, 5G is what's happening in China. If you look at what's happening in Europe, if you look at other countries, and as you think about where we are in America, do a comparative analysis for me with other countries, whether it's Dubai, whether it's Beijing, whether it's Tokyo. How do you see where we are in our development vis-a-vis the technology? Are we in the middle of the pack? Are we leading the pack? Or are we behind the pack?
Yeah, I think in general we're near the front of the pack in almost every infrastructure category going. I think you can certainly find examples where the US is the clear leader, and you can also find circumstances where we're middle of the road. But I think that varies a lot by geography. I think urban America is probably ahead of rural America in many applications. So I think to do the analysis you're describing, Johnny, I think you have to build a matrix almost of parts of the country, urban, suburban, rural within those parts of the country. And then you got to build a variety of columns associated with all kinds of different components of the infrastructure portfolio. But, there are parts of it that do have a lot of potholes,
Right.
to your previous comment. And that's the good part about being in this industry is the work's rarely never done.
Yeah.
It's always there, and nobody can really afford permanence.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the challenge.
Marty, give us some parting thoughts on artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. You guys have a product called Asset 360 that you use as part of your consulting to help companies reimagine themselves, run better. How much is automation, the software transformation applied to infrastructure? How are we going to see that? What is going to change, or what's going on that you can share that is really significant? I know it is heavily needed on as it relates to all the telecom work that you guys did, and it drives the enablement of that. Give us a glimpse of that AI applied to infrastructure.
Yeah, I think where that's going, Andres, is back to one of the comments to Llewellyn's question earlier about how are you going to get all the work done? Well, one of the ways is to get more out of the people that are able to do the work. And the best way to get more work out of the people is only have them do what's essential to be done at any particular time and don't have them distracted. So I've been impressed with the machine learning, with the artificial intelligence, with the predictive analytics tools that have been developed in industry that allow people to better focus their efforts And, a really trivial but meaningful example I'm aware of is a utility in the Kansas City area that used to have 2 crews who spent every day of every week driving around and going into manholes to see if they needed to pump water out of that manhole to prevent an electric fault occurring because of a flooded manhole. And they just had a schedule, and it was Monday you go on the east side of town, Tuesday you go on the west, then you go north, then you go south. Well, what they ended up doing was installing sensors, collecting data, correlating that data to rainfall, and deciding that they could tell there were only a half a dozen manholes that ever needed to be checked, and they only needed to be checked if it had more than a half an inch of rain the night before. And so 2 two-man crews were dramatically freed up, because if it didn't rain a half an inch, you didn't put them on that job anymore. And you gave them other work to do, and they didn't lose their job. They just stayed more productive and did more beneficial things instead of people monitoring this. And so linking sensor data to weather data and building a history said, these are the only ones we got to go to. And I think you'll see more of that predictive intelligence applied to infrastructure in a way that helps with, all the way back to Llewellyn's early question about, are there enough people to do what's needed? Well, yeah, there is, if people only do what's needed and don't be distracted with unnecessary tasks. So I think that's a huge opportunity. Now, to do that, it takes a good telecom network. It takes good analytics software, but it can be done, and it can reduce labor and put that labor onto other more productive tasks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Parting thoughts, Marty. What's the next in the next 90 days, other than talking to me again and maybe project at CMG?
Yep. For me personally, is that what you're saying? What am I going to do? Well, I'm joining a board that starts 1st of November in the telecom space. I'm active in a variety of other kind of business plan writing activities. I think there's some really cool stuff that can be done in the infrastructure space. And so I'm doing that, and then enjoying the fact that our oldest daughter and her husband just had twin babies. And so we're distracted with that too.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Gentlemen, parting thoughts, comments, questions?
I have enjoyed the conversation. I think, as you would say, the infrastructure is what makes us go.
I think,
hold on.
sorry, I think this is a seminal period. Europe has to settle down. We have to come to terms with our relationship with China. We have to stop Chinese envy. They're not getting all upset because we hear they have 10,000 kV lines and we only have 5,000. That kind of sort of idiot thing. We have to find a new place for technology in our lives and acknowledge that they're going to change out of all recognition as technology evolves, and as they've already changed, and that we are on the cusp of a very new and different and brave new world.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, John, take us away. Let's close this great conversation with some inspiration from Texas.
I wish the buck was still silver, back when the country was strong. Back before Nixon and before the Vietnam War came along. Before the Beatles and yesterday, when a man could still work and still would. It's the best of the bright life behind us now, and all the good times really over for good. And all we're rolling down feel like a snowball headed for hell. With no kind of hope for the flag of the Liberty Bell. Let's make a Ford and a Chevy that'll still last 10 years like they should. 'Cause the best of the good life is still ahead of now, and the good times ain't over for good. I thought that was appropriate, Marty.
Excellent.
That was a
Marty,
good
thank
one.
you very much.
Guys, I've got to do another program. Great to be with you, Marty. Good luck in your retirement and don't stop working.
Right. Thanks,
Okay.
Llewellyn.